Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Old South Meeting House. My name is Erica Lindemood. I'm the education director here. Nathaniel Hawthorne is best known for his novels like The Scarlet Letter and The House of the Seven Gables, both published by Ticknor and Fields, headquartered at the Old Corner Bookstore right across the street. However, for much of his career, he wrote short stories and tales. Hawthorne never gave a public reading or lecture in his lifetime. He was very shy, but more importantly, he hated crowds and being the center of attention. Even so, he's here this afternoon. So please, if you would give him a little encouragement and applaud a bit and welcome Nathaniel Hawthorne. Thank you.
I suppose I am likely expected to begin by offering my gratitude for the opportunity to speak with you this afternoon. I will not. I'm only here at the bequest of my publishers, Mr. William Ticknor and Mr. James Fields. They seem to believe that once in a while it's worth the effort for me to ingratiate myself to my potential reading audience. I will not tell you my life story. I will not. Yes, it's true, I was born and raised mostly in Salem, Massachusetts, and I lived for a time in Boston while working at the Boston Customs House, and also that eventually I moved to Concord and befriended people like Henry Thoreau. However, you did not come to hear my life story. You came to hear my stories. So I've chosen a small number that I will read to you in the hopes of ingratiating myself to you readers. The first story I will read is from the year 1837, and if you'll pardon my French, the title is Monsieur du Miroir. There is nobody whom I have more attentively studied, yet of whom I have less real knowledge than this gentleman, Monsieur du Miroir. Who and what is he, really? And how do we seem to be so permanently linked? Do not think any part of the narrative that follows is frivolous, a subject of such grave reflection needs the minutest particulars, and however extraordinary and utterly incredible some of this tale may appear, I pledge it to be fact. Despite his impenetrable mystery, we never had the slightest disagreement, he and I. Moreover, there are reasons for supposing him a relative of mine, despite his French-sounding name. He bears a strong personal resemblance to myself. One might think we were estranged twins, in fact. But Monsieur du Miroir says nothing of his paternity. And to be honest, he seems to lack the faculty of speech altogether. Nevertheless, there exists the greatest sympathy between us. Such is his confidence in my taste that he copies all his clothing after mine. I never try on a new garment without expecting to meet Monsieur du Miroir in one of the exact same pattern. He has duplicates of all my waistcoats and cravats and shirts, and even an old coat, manufactured, I suspect, to be an exact facsimile of a beloved old coat of mine, stitch by stitch. And he takes a deep empathy in my life. When I was in love, Monsieur du Miroir looked passionate and tender, but when my mistress discarded me, this gentleman grew lackadaisical on my behalf. His temper rises to blood heat if I suffer any wrong. Yet, I cannot recall that he ever struck a blow on my behalf. nor, in fact, do I perceive any tangible good has resulted from his constant interference in my affairs. In my distrustful moods, I suspect Monsieur du Miroir's sympathy to be mere outward show. I've often seen him in the ballroom and the theater. More often, I find this whimsical friend of mine lingering in the saloon near one of the large looking-glass mirrors. Oh, he is so full of unaccountable eccentricities that I never acknowledge the slightest connection with him in public. One of his most remarkable peculiarities is his fondness for water. He cares not if it be from a town pump or a horse pond. After a heavy rain, I have even been scandalized to see Monsieur du Miroir in full dress paddling in the mud puddles. I admit, I have even discerned this ridiculous gentleman at the bottom of a well. It is difficult to conceive how he keeps his clothes always as dry and comfortable as my own, however. Wandering the forests, I have come upon ponds likely never discovered before, and was startled to find Monsieur du Miroir there before me. And the solitude seemed lonelier for his presence. To speak frankly, I could bring the most astounding proofs that Monsieur du Miroir is a conjurer. He conveys himself from place to place more rapidly than the swiftest steamboat or rail car. He is not stopped by brick walls, by oaken doors, or iron bolts. Even in my private chamber at bedtime, sitting alone in the dark, I know if I were to light a lamp and step a few paces, Monsieur du Miroir would be sure to meet me, with a lamp also in his hand. Were I to take the stagecoach tomorrow, even without hinting my intentions to anyone, I should expect to share my private apartment with this inevitable Monsieur du Miroir. Even while writing these sentences, I happened to glance towards a large round globe of brass andirons, and lo, I see a miniature apparition of Monsieur du Miroir, with his face contorted, as if he were making fun of my amazement. But he has played so many of these jokes that they begin to lose their effect. I do wonder, however, that he never trusts me enough to shake my hand. Certainly, if you step toward him to meet him, he readily advances. If you offer him your hand, he extends his own, but I can never even grasp his little finger. Monsieur du Miroir is a slippery fellow. These truly are matters of special admiration. Truth be told, I wondered, if I must have so intrusive and intimate in my life, who stares me in the face in my closest privacy and follows me even to my bedchamber, I wondered I should prefer, scandal aside, a young girl instead of this brooding, mustachioed companion. Yet, apparently companions like Monsieur du Miroir have an attachment to only one person, regardless of disposition or infamy, or even if deserted by all the rest of the world. So will it be with my associate. Our fates appear inseparably blended. It seems, in fact, that we came into existence together, just as my shadow follows me into the sunshine. We have been young together, we grow old together, and count the wrinkles on the other's brow and the white hairs on the other's head. I wonder, when the coffin lid shall have closed over me, what is to become of poor Monsieur du Miroir? Will he follow me to my grave? Will he linger where I have lived? No, because then his task is fulfilled, and this mysterious being shall vanish from the earth forever. He will pass to the dark realm of nothingness. In recent years, indeed, there has been much to sadden my relationship with Monsieur du Miroir. Had not our union been a necessary condition of our life, we must have been estranged before now. In youth, my affections were warm and free, and our time together gave me, an excellent opinion of myself. Speechless as he was, Monsieur du Miroir had a most agreeable way of calling me a handsome fellow, and I, of course, returned the compliment. Now, when I see him, I reflect on the years wasted in sluggishness due to a lack of hope and impulse, or equally thrown away in toil that has accomplished no good end. But no, these thoughts are unworthy of me. Instead, we should sit face to face at our next meeting, reflecting upon his power of following me wherever I go. I will compare the attempt to escape him to the idea of escaping a memory or my own heart. And yet I wonder if Monsieur du Miroir is a wanderer from the spiritual world with nothing to prove him human except his visibility. Excuse me. Oh, even as I think of him, there he appears, an unbidden guest with his eyes locked on mine. There he stands and returns my gaze as if he too was thinking the same thoughts as I just was. I somewhat doubt which of us is the visionary form, which the mystery, or if we are but twin brethren of one fate in mutually reflected spheres. Oh, friend, can you not hear and answer me? Break down this barrier between us. Grasp my hand. Speak. Perhaps I deify a mere shadow, a specter of myself. And so, farewell, Monsieur du Miroir. Perhaps it is you who are the wiser of the two, though your whole business is reflection. I began working with Ticknor & Fields with my more famous novels, The Scarlet Letter, The House of the Seven Gables, and so forth. But in fact, the majority of my career was spent in writing shorter works, not novels, but tales and short stories. The next one that I would like to read to you is likely my most famous tale, and it does take place in my native town of Salem. The story was published in 1835, and it's called Young Goodman Brown. In case you're not familiar with my interest in our puritanical past, this should give you an idea. Young Goodman Brown came forth at sunset into the street at Salem Village and exchanged a parting kiss with his young wife. And Faith, as the wife was aptly named, Faith let the wind play with the pink ribbons of her cap while she called out to Goodman Brown, "Dearest heart," whispered she softly and rather sadly, "prithee put off your journey until sunrise. Pray tarry with me this night, dear husband, of all nights in the year." "My love and my faith," replied Goodman Brown, "of all nights in the year, this one night must I tarry away from thee. My journey, as thou callest it, forth and back again, must needs be done between now and sunrise. What, my sweet, pretty wife, dost thou doubt me already?" "Then God bless you," said Faith with the pink ribbons, "and may you find all well when you come back." "Amen," cried Goodman Brown. And so they parted. The young man pursued his way until, being about to turn the corner by the meeting house, he looked back and saw the head of Faith still peeping after him with a melancholy air in spite of her pink ribbons. "Poor little Faith," thought he. "What a wretch am I to leave her on such an errand? Well, she's a blessed angel on earth, and after this one night I'll cling to her skirts and follow her to heaven." With this excellent resolve for the future, Goodman Brown made haste on his present evil purpose. He had taken a dreary road, darkened by all the gloomiest trees of the forest. There is a strangeness in such solitude. The traveler knows not who may be concealed behind a tree trunk. Goodman Brown glanced fearfully behind him and said to himself, "What if the devil himself should be at my very elbow?" And lo, looking forward again, he beheld the figure of a man seated on the foot of an old tree. He arose at Goodman Brown's approach and walked onward side by side with him. "You are late, Goodman Brown," said he. "The clock of the Old South was striking as I came through Boston, and that is a full 15 minutes ago." "Faith kept me back a while," replied the young man with a tremor in his voice, though his companion was not unexpected. This elder person had an indescribable air of one who knew the world, one who felt at home at the governor's dinner table or even in the king's court. But the only thing about him that could be fixed upon as remarkable was his staff, which bore the likeness of a great black snake, looking as if it could twist and wriggle itself like a living serpent. "Come, Goodman Brown," cried his fellow traveler. "This is a dull place for the beginning of a journey. Perhaps you could take my staff, if you are so soon weary." "Friend," said the other, exchanging his slow pace for a full stop, "friend, now that we have met, it is my purpose to return whence I came. I do have scruples." "Sayest thou so?" replied he of the serpent. "Let us walk on, then, nevertheless, reasoning as we go. And if I do not convince thee, then thou shalt turn back. We are but a little way into the forest yet." "Too far, too far," exclaimed the goodman, yet unconsciously he resumed his walk. "No, my father never went into the woods on such an errand, nor his father before him. We have been a race of honest men, and I shall not be the first of the name of Brown that ever took this path." "Well said, Goodman Brown," observed the elder person, "but I have been well acquainted with your family. Your grandfather and father both were my good friends, and many a pleasant walk have we had along this very path." "If it be as thou sayest," replied Goodman Brown, "I marvel they never spoke of these matters. No, it cannot be true. We of New England are a people of prayer and abide no such wickedness." The elder traveler now burst into a fit of irrepressible mirth, shaking himself so violently that his snake-like staff actually seemed to wriggle in sympathy. "Well, go on, Goodman Brown, go on, but prithee don't kill me with laughter." "Well, then, to end the matter at once," said Goodman Brown, "there is my wife, Faith. It would break her dear little heart, and I'd rather break my own." "Well, I would not want Faith to come to any harm, not for 20 old women, like the one hobbling towards us now." As he spoke, he pointed his staff at a female figure on the path. Goodman Brown recognized the very pious and exemplary woman who had taught him his catechism in his youth, and who was still his moral and spiritual advisor, along with the minister and the deacon. A marvel, truly, that Goody Cloyce should be so far in the wilderness at nightfall," said he. "I do not wish to be seen with such a traveler as you, and so I shall cut through the woods until we have left this good woman behind." Accordingly, the young man turned aside, but took care to watch his companion, who kept on the path until within a staff's length of the old dame. Meanwhile, she, despite her age, made her way with singular speed while mumbling, A prayer, no doubt. The traveler then put forth his staff to her. "The devil!" screamed the pious old lady. "Ah, then Goody Cloyce remembers her old friend," observed the traveler. "Yea, truly it is," cried the old dame. "I decided to walk to the meeting. They tell me there is a very nice young man coming tonight." "Here is my staff," answered her friend. "Take it, and you shall be there in a twinkling." So saying, he threw the staff down at her feet, where it seemed to assume life. And when young Goodman Brown looked again, he saw only his fellow traveler alone, who waited for him as calmly as if nothing had happened. That old woman taught me my catechism," said the young man. And there was a world of meaning in that simple comment. The traveler plucked a branch of maple to serve for a new walking stick. The moment his fingers touched it, it became strangely withered and dried up. Now, in a gloomy hollow of the road, Goodman Brown sat himself down on a stump and refused to go any further. "Friend," said he, "my mind is made up. Not another step will I budge on this errand. What if that wretched old woman has chosen to go to the devil? Is that any reason why I should quit my dear faith and go along with her?" "Oh, you will think better of this by and by. Sit here, then, and rest yourself a while, and when you feel like moving again, I shall leave you my staff to help you along." Without more words, he threw the maple stick and vanished into the deepening gloom. The young man sat a few moments by the roadside, applauding himself greatly and thinking how clear a conscience he had, and what calm sleep would come that very night, which was to have been spent so wickedly but so purely and sweetly now in the arms of faith. But Goodman Brown now heard the tramp of horses along the road and decided to conceal himself within the forest, conscious of the guilty purpose that had brought him hither. On came the hoof tramps and the voices of the riders, two grave old voices conversing as they drew near. Young Goodman Brown could have sworn, were such a thing possible, that he recognized the voices of the minister and the deacon. Said the voice like the deacon's, "They tell me there is a goodly young woman to be taken into communion tonight." "Mighty well, deacon," replied the solemn old tones of the minister. "Spur up, or we shall be late. Nothing can be done, you know, until we arrive." The hoofs clattered again, and the voices were gone. Whither, then, could these holy men be journeying so deep into the heathen wilderness? Young Goodman Brown was nearly overburdened with a heavy heart. He looked up to the sky, doubting whether there really was a heaven above him. Yet he saw. There was the blue arch, and the stars brightening in it. "With heaven above and faith below, I will yet stand firm against the devil," cried Goodman Brown. While he still gazed upward and had lifted his hands to pray, a cloud suddenly hid the brightening stars. As if from the depths of this black mass of cloud came a confused and doubtful sound of voices. The listener fancied that he could distinguish the accents of his own townspeople, men and women. There was one voice of a young woman, uttering lamentations and sorrowfully entreating for some favor, and all the unseen multitude, both saints and sinners, seemed to encourage her onward. "Faith?" shouted Goodman Brown, in a voice of agony and desperation. The unhappy husband held his breath for a response. There was a scream, drowned immediately in a loud murmur of voices, fading into far-off laughter, and the dark clouds swept away, leaving the clear and silent sky above Goodman Brown. But something fluttered lightly down through the air and caught on the branch of a tree. The young man seized it and beheld a pink ribbon. "My faith is gone," cried he after one stupefied moment. "There is no good on earth. Sin is but a name. Come, devil, come, witch, come, warlock, for thee is this world given." Maddened with despair, Goodman Brown grasped the staff and set forth again. He seemed to fly along the forest path rather than to walk or run. Soon he was in the heart of the dark wilderness, still rushing onward with the instinct that guides mortal men towards evil. The whole forest was full of frightful sounds, as if all nature were laughing at him. "Think not to frighten me with your deviltry. Come, devil, for here comes Goodman Brown." Finally, at the hour of midnight, he paused and heard the swell of what seemed a hymn, solemnly sung by many voices in the distance, a chorus not of human voices, but of all the sounds of the wilderness pealing in awful harmony together. Soon a light glared full upon his eyes, and he saw a rock bearing some resemblance to an altar or a pulpit surrounded by flame. As the red light arose and fell, Goodman Brown saw a grave and dark-clad company. Among them appeared faces of politicians and council members, ancient maidens, all of excellent repute, as well as fair young girls. He recognized a score of the church members of Salem village, famous for their especial sanctity. The good old deacon was there. There were also men of dissolute lives and women of spotted fame, wretches given over to all vice and suspected even of horrid crimes. It was strange to see that the good shrank not from the wicked, nor were the sinners abashed by the saints. But where is faith? Thought Goodman Brown, and as hope came into his heart, he trembled. Another verse of the hymn arose, a slow and mournful strain. Verse after verse was sung. Then the fire shot up a loftier flame. And then, bursting forth from the pulpit rock, a glowing arch appeared, underneath which appeared a figure. "Bring forth the converts," cried a voice that echoed through the field and rolled into the forest. And at the word, Goodman Brown stepped forth from the shadow of the trees and approached the congregation, when the minister and good old deacon seized his arms and led him to the blazing rock. Thither came also the slender form of a veiled female, led by Goody Cloyce, that pious teacher of the catechism. "Welcome, my children," said the dark figure, "to the communion of your race. My children, look around you. There are all whom you have known from youth to be sinless. Yet here they all are in my worshiping assembly." Among them, young Goodman Brown now realized the veiled woman was his faith. "Oh, now you are undeceived. Evil is the nature of mankind. Evil can be our only happiness. Welcome again, my children, to the communion of your race." "Faith, faith," cried the husband, "look up to heaven and resist the wicked one." Whether faith obeyed, he knew not. Hardly had he spoken when he found himself suddenly alone in a quiet, empty forest, as if the meeting had never occurred. The next morning, young Goodman Brown came slowly into the street of Salem. Knowing the secrets of the good people of the village, he stared around him like a man bewildered. He saw the good old minister and the old deacon. He saw Goody Cloyce surrounded by children for catechism studies. Turning the corner by the meeting house, he spied the head of Faith, still with her pink ribbons. But Goodman Brown looked sternly and sadly at her and passed on without a greeting. The question must be, Had Goodman Brown fallen asleep in the forest and only dreamed a wild dream of a witch meeting? Believe what you will. But alas, young Goodman Brown became stern, sad, darkly meditative, distrustful. And when he had lived long and was borne to his grave a corpse, followed by Faith, then an aged woman, they carved no hopeful verse upon his tombstone, for even his dying hour was gloom. Seems to have made you uncomfortable. I'd like to conclude with one more that should give you an understanding of the kind of author that I am. This will be a short one, I hope. This is the first time I've read this in public. It's called The Devil in Manuscript. Now, this story was first published in 1835, but never published again until I started working with Ticknor and Fields. Let's begin. On a bitter evening in December, I arrived in a large town where lived a friend of mine, one of those gifted youths who cultivate poetry and belles lettres, and yet call themselves law students. It was a bitter night and cold, though there was no snow. The wind blew violently, and if I but spread my coat like a mainsail, I could scud along the street at 10 knots. After this picture of an inclement night, behold us seated by a great blazing fire, which looked so comfortable and delicious that I felt inclined to lie down and roll among the hot coals. The usual furniture of a lawyer's office was around us, stacks of books, amongst various legal papers scattered over desks and tables. There was also a pile of blotted manuscripts. My friend, whom I shall call Oberon, looked at these papers with a peculiar expression of disquietude. "I could believe," said he soberly, "that there is a devil in this pile of blotted papers. If you read them, you will see I endeavored to embody the character of a fiend, as represented in our traditions in the written words of witchcraft. Oh, I am horrified at what my brain created and shudder at my own dark ideas. Would that these manuscripts were out of my sight. Writing these hellish works sucked away my happiness, my innocence. When you read them, have you felt the same influence, the same accursed power?" "Oh, not at all, unless the spell is in a desire to turn novelist myself." "Novelist!" exclaimed Oberon half seriously. "Well, then indeed, my devil has his claw on you. You are gone. You cannot even pray for deliverance. But we will be the last victims. Tonight I will burn my manuscripts, committing them to flaming retribution. You cannot conceive the effect composing these tales has had on me. I have become ambitious, and I am surrounding myself with shadows which bewilder me. I've been drawn from the beaten path of the world into a strange sort of solitude. When these tales are ashes, perhaps I shall be free again. Besides, it is a small loss. Nobody will publish them. They have been refused by 17 so far. They tell me they already have too many submissions." "Well," said I, "what a voluminous mass the unpublished literature of America must be." Said my friend, "One is giving up the business on purpose, I suspect, in order to escape publishing my book. One dared suggest that I pay half the cost of an edition myself, whether the books sell or not. Another advises I publish by subscription." "The villain!" exclaimed I. Further, one publisher had the impertinence to criticize my writing and propose what he calls vast improvements. "It might not be amiss to pull that fellow's nose," I said. "One very honest publisher tells me fairly that no American publisher will meddle with an American work, especially one by an unknown writer. But the devil of the business is this. My experience makes me loathe my own writing. I actually feel a physical sickness in my stomach. I glance at the manuscripts on the table, and I tell you there is a demon in them. I will enjoy seeing them blazing, as if taking vengeance upon an enemy." Now, I must admit, I did not oppose my friend's idea initially. My private opinion was that his tales would make a more brilliant appearance in the fire than anywhere else. After drinking a bottle of champagne, he drew the tales towards him, though he held them at arm's length. Sometimes my ideas were like precious stones under the earth, requiring toil to dig them up and polish them. Sometimes my thoughts gushed like a delicious stream, yet it was all nonsense. My friend now looked into the blazing fire and violently took hold of his papers, and I thought of a few of his passages which were actually pretty good, and tried to hold his arm back. "Let me alone," said Oberon, his eyes flashing fire. "I will burn them. Not a scorched syllable shall escape. Would you have me be a damned author, to undergo sneers, taunts, abuse, and cold neglect? Not to mention faint praise bestowed only for pity's sake. Not even the grave could protect me. People could still read my work scornfully after my death. No, I burn these tales, and I will never write another." Before I could stop him, the deed was done. He had thrown the manuscripts into the hottest part of the fire. Oberon stood gazing at the conflagration, and as his work vanished forever, he thought he could see the characters he created burning within. "They blaze," said he, "as if I had steeped them in the intensest spirit of genius. I think I see even the villainous fiend I created. Well, the tales are gone." And indeed, the papers were reduced to a heap of black cinders. The destroyer knelt down to look upon them. "What is more potent than fire?" said he in his gloomiest tone. "See how quickly it has annihilated all the creations of long nights and days. All that I had accomplished, all that I planned for future years, all now but a heap of embers." But the embers were not extinguished. As we watched, the fire rose up the chimney like a demon with sable wings. In a moment, there was a loud cry in the street below us. "Fire! Fire!" Now, it being a windy night, a fire would spread quickly, especially as this little town was made of mostly wooden structures. It being so cold, the water pumps were frozen. There would be no hope to fight it. The street was soon alive with people, the air full of voices. The bells from the steeples clanged out the alarm. All was hurry, confusion, and terror amid the universal cry, "Fire! Fire!" All at once, the truth flashed upon my friend. His frenzy took the hue of joy, and with a wild gesture of exultation, Oberon cried aloud, "My tales! The chimney! The roof! The fiend has gone forth by night and startled thousands in fear and wonder from their beds. Here I stand now, a triumphant author. Huzzah! Huzzah! My brain has set the town on fire." Oh, hello. You'll have to excuse Mr. Hawthorne. He really does not like being in front of people, and because of that, he's refused to answer any questions that you might have. However, my name is Rob Velella, and I've been portraying Nathaniel Hawthorne for the past several years now. I would be happy to answer your questions on his behalf. If you have any questions about the tales that I read tonight, or in general about Hawthorne's life and work, I really would be happy to answer them. It's worth mentioning it's so great to be here because across the street, this side, is where Hawthorne published his most famous works. Tickner and Fields, the old corner bookstore. Now, if you do have questions, Erica would love to hand you the microphone so that we can actually hear you. Do you have any questions for me or for Mr. Hawthorne regarding his life and works? Over here.
What with Mr. Hawthorne's amazing imagination, I can't imagine him working at the custom house. It must have been quite boring for him.
The question is about Hawthorne's job at the custom house, and he took a couple of these kinds of jobs because he needed money. You can imagine being an author of tales wasn't very lucrative, particularly in the beginning of his career. And he hated it, absolutely hated it. The drudgery of working these regular full-time jobs essentially stifled him creatively. Most of the time when he was working these full-time normal jobs, he couldn't write at all. In fact, when he's in Boston, his comment is, "I have dreamed of my tales of old, but find that my forenoons in the customs house have undone my imagination from the night before." So I mean, he's really, that's a paraphrase, by the way. So he's really stifled by these full-time jobs. He really can't write unless he's not working too.
That's right.
You're thinking of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who sued his first wife's family after she died. Hawthorne's wife outlived Hawthorne by about 7 years. However, there's an interesting lawsuit attached with that. This is a true story. After Hawthorne died, his copyright and his publication rights went to his wife, Sophia Peabody Hawthorne, one of the Peabody sisters, if you're familiar with Megan Marshall's book. And Mrs. Hawthorne had reason to be suspicious that Ticknor and Fields, by then only Fields, by the way, was not paying her paying the same amount of money that had been promised to her husband, so she threatened a lawsuit. And eventually Mr. Fields retired from the business, and that was that. Often I say Hawthorne had very few close friends. One of them was William Ticknor, half of the publishing house Ticknor and Fields. He wasn't so keen on Mr. Fields. When Ticknor died, right next to, with Hawthorne by his side, I think Hawthorne also became suspicious of how Mr. Fields was running the publishing house.
Could you tell us about his friendships with other authors?
Sure. Well, first of all, his best friend was Franklin Pierce, the President of the United States, who got him his best job, which was working in Liverpool. But among authors, I think the two with whom he was closest, Henry Wadsworth Longfellow was extremely good friends with Hawthorne, and I would also put in that category Henry David Thoreau, which is why this is part of a two-part series. Thoreau and Hawthorne were the loners of Concord, a town known for concordance, coming together and being friendly and social. And I think as the two loners of the town, they came together independent of the rest of the town. We've often talked about how Mr. Thoreau sold the boat that he used in A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers to Hawthorne. Hawthorne bought the Muscataquid, as it was called, renamed it the Pond Lily, and we picture the two of them sailing out on the Concord River together for hours at a time, not saying a word to one another, and it was the best conversations they ever had.
Thank you so much, Rob. Thank you, everyone, for coming.